Hello, everybody. So today on this episode of the Matadoras, we just want to thank you for being here, and we want to talk about exiting an abusive relationship. We also have a story of a personal friend of Lizzie's that had a very unfortunate ending during her abusive relationship. And so with that, we want to share that story, and we want to talk about how important it is to exit an abusive relationship and to do it well. Okay. So to start off, as you know, we are the Matadoras. As you know, Lizzie and I were both married to the same man, not at the same time. And we started this whole journey to help women that are in any kind of a toxic relationship, anything dysfunctional, because we both were for a long time. And then watched our ex, who we call Rex, go to number 3 family and number 4 family. And multiple other women that he, kind of perped on during his sexual addiction stuff. I don't even want to go into it in this one, but I do go into it in our story in our very first podcast. And we will also talk more about sexual addiction in a separate podcast. But back to the point. Having an exit plan is so important when leaving a toxic relationship, because simply this: when you confront an abuser, we all look at the word abuser and leaving and having an exit plan, and sometimes we think he's hitting her, he's kicking her, he's punching her. We need to understand that emotional abuse is also just as abusive, and this person can go AWOL when they lose control of you, because abusers, it's about control, right? It's about control. It's about manipulating you to have control. It's about convincing you you're nothing so they have control, raising their voice, all those things to have control. Once you leave that person or threaten to leave that person, they suddenly see all of that control and all of those tactics they've used on you for possibly years going out the window, and you going out the window. So very, very important to understand that there are multiple types of abuse, and we're going to go into that right now, and that abuse will escalate exponentially once you decide you need to leave. So we're going to start with emotional abuse, because this is kind of the sneaky one. Emotional abuse can come in many different forms, but I'm going to give you 5 signs. Okay. There are many more, but we'll start with the 5 probably most common. One of them would be unreasonable jealousy. Now, myself and Lizzie both experienced this with our combined marriage to Rex, but also Lizzie experienced this in her first marriage as well. Unreasonable jealousy would be something like you talk about a male coworker and your husband starts to get angry, or you flash a look at somebody and smile. Maybe it's an older person, whatever, and he suddenly gets, overbearing and questions you. Things like that. Also, another sign would be controlling. Okay, this person just seems to always want to be in control of what you're doing, where you're going, your personal decisions, maybe even where you work, maybe how you work, maybe even your friends. He just doesn't seem to like your friends, never wants you to have friends around. You just name it. Almost any part of your life, he wants to kind of be in control and involved and have a big say and direct you, even if it feels like he's directing you, if that makes sense. Another sign that you could be emotionally abused is humiliation. This can include subtle little jabs, verbal insults, subtle little comments. For instance, I was flying with my ex in an airplane. We were going on a trip, and the airplane hostess came by and she said, "Do you guys have any trash?" And he looked at her and said, "Her right there." And it was so humiliating and so embarrassing. And he played it off as a joke, but I knew by then it was just a backwards way of flirting with her and making her feel like she was important and, sending a little message. A lot of times humiliation happens in public, little verbal insults, little comments. Sometimes it's in private, sometimes it's both, but you feel humiliated and you feel small. Another sign you could be emotionally abused would be rejection and withholding love. So let's say you ask for something or you say something and, your intimate partner doesn't like it, or maybe you confront them about something they're doing. Suddenly, they don't talk to you for days. They won't be intimate with you. They won't hug you. They act like you're nothing. That is definitely a sign of emotional abuse. That is harsh and horrible. Other times it'll be an aggression, but it's not like they don't hit, they don't hit you. They don't physically hurt you, but they get really close. For instance, you get in an argument, they get mad, or you confront them about something, even if you do it gently and kindly. Suddenly they bow up, they get in your face, they're screaming in your face, they're spitting in your face, their veins are popping out. Or let's say they just throw something at you. I know my ex, I was, so we were on vacation actually, and I was holding one of our babies. And I was standing at the top of a set of stairs, and we were out in the cold in Seattle. And I said something that made him mad, and he turned around and he gave me a shove. And I'm telling you, I was at the very top of this huge flight of stairs. We were going up to look at a mountain or something. And he gave me a little shove, and it was just enough to throw me off balance with that baby. And I swear, thank God something intervened and I was able to grab on to the staircase because I would have fallen down that huge flight of stairs with this little baby. So aggressive behavior, not quite hitting you, can never say you were hit, won't show any bruises, but they're darn close. So those are several signs that you could definitely be emotionally abused. Okay, so with that, I need you to understand that if you're dealing with someone that is aggressive and emotionally abusive, they can easily convert to physical abuse or even worse once they are losing control of you or once you cross them in a way that they don't like. So let me give you some statistics now about actual physical abuse, okay? Very important that you know these. And actually, I was very surprised seeing how common this is. So with physical abuse, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men experience physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. There are 3 deaths a day and 1 death a day. 3 deaths a day for women and 1 death a day for men from a domestic partner every single day. On average, the abused will leave their abuser 7 times before they finally leave for good. Women are 6 times more likely to be killed if there's a gun in the house. And lastly, 53% of women will blame themselves after an abusive situation unless they have finally left the relationship. So very important to really understand how common this is. So I would like to quickly share, and then I'm going to pass this over to Lizzie, my experience when I was leaving Rex. And again, we were married 26 years. We had 4 children. And I'd left him 9 times during that relationship. Each time I would pack up all the children, I would go to my mother's house and I would say, I'm done. I just can't do this anymore. I'm done. This aggression and all this emotional abuse was definitely in the relationship, as well as severe financial abuse. We were always broke. We were always striving for money. And then also his sexual addiction was incredibly prominent. So being a faith-based woman, I would leave. Then, our pastor or someone from the church, he would go and he would confide in them and he would tell all and he would weep and sob and cry, beg and plead, go to all my friends, go to my mom, go to everybody, have them call me, have them ask, if I would come back, which my mom, by the way, always had my back. She never did that. And neither did my sister. But there were still people in my life that thought he was a really great guy. Half of that was my fault because I hid what he did. I was too embarrassed and ashamed and humiliated, that he was behaving this way. And I wouldn't tell anybody. And so now what happens, right? Your inner circle thinks that they're a great guy, And so now when they're sobbing and weeping and confessing their sins and saying that they'll never do this again, they get all this empathy from people. So he would do that. And within about 2 months, most times I would go back thinking he was a changed man. He now started counseling. He now started doing everything right. He was love bombing me, et cetera, et cetera. So finally, you guys, after 26 years, and the last experience that, I did describe in our story, our first podcast, I just came to the end of my rope and I could not do this anymore. And I didn't care if God himself came and stood in front of me and said, "You're staying." I could not stay. I just could not do it anymore. So I let him know, as I had many other times, and I'm sure by now he did not believe me, but I let him know that I was leaving. And immediately he starts doing the very same thing. He starts sobbing, he starts crying, he starts confessing things because he thought, well, if he confessed things, that meant that, he was being honest, and I felt he was coming clean, and did all the tricks. But I just had no interest. I was completely done. So he stayed in the house and he wouldn't leave. And finally, after a couple weeks, I said, you just can't stay here. You need to go. By this point, he's, crying and pleading and being sweet and kind and wonderful. But as soon as I just put my foot down and this didn't work, things got ugly. I asked him to move out. He was furious. We had guns in the house. He started getting really aggressive and really scary. Now, he didn't tell me he was going to kill me or anything like that, but his anger just was out of control, screaming that I wasn't perfect either. How could I do this to him? How could I do this to the kids? What was wrong with me? Look at all he'd done for me. Nobody will love me like he did, et cetera, et cetera. And he leaves the house, finally. Next thing I know, I'm getting a phone call. This is probably a day or two later. He's on his way to work, and he calls me hysterical, crying, sobbing, screaming into the phone that he's going to run off the road right now and commit suicide. Now, this isn't the first time he's threatened to commit suicide. He had threatened to commit suicide so many times during our relationship that I honestly, you guys, just got to the point where I just felt it was a manipulation tactic and I no longer believed it. It terrified me the first few times. After that, I just said, oh, whatever, that sounds terrible, but I'm sorry. It was just used to get me back. This time, though, there was such an emotional surge of absolute panic and hopelessness in his voice that I thought, he's going to do it. He's actually going to do it. He was describing this ditch. He was describing that he was driving 90 miles an hour. He said, I'm just letting you know. I just want you to tell the kids I love them. I'm done. And then he hangs up the phone and, of course, won't answer the phone when I call back. Oh, it was a horrible moment, you guys. So I called his boss at work because he was headed to work. I called his boss, who was a friend of ours, and now I'm crying and I'm telling him what's going on. Well, half an hour later, Rex shows up to work. He's there. He just did that whole thing to completely freak me out. And another tactic again to just show how desperate he was and that I had to stay with him. Well, his boss was furious and gave him a very stern talking to about this. But you know what? It didn't work. It did not work. In the months that followed, he went from begging and pleading to threatening to I'm coming over to get my guns now to, again, confessing everything and talking about God and how he's forgiven everything. And then he started stalking me. I went to church. He shows up in the parking lot. He shows up to say he just was going to give me back something that he got from the house. I go to work. He shows up in the parking lot before work. He's now sobbing and crying and begging and pleading. And what can I do? It was creepy. It seemed like he just knew when and where I was going to be. So I went through every single thing. And again, I was just so done that it just made things worse for him. And thankfully, I finally just changed all the locks on the doors, changed my routine, and told a lot of my friends and family what was going on and that they need to not answer any phone calls from him. And I gave him the whole gray rock treatment. And eventually he calmed down and went on with his life. But it was not a fun experience. And I understand why women are terrified to leave, because even just the emotional toxicity and exhaustion that you have to deal with, it is so hard, you guys. But Lizzie's going to talk about somebody that teaches how to properly leave an abusive ex. And it is the best material she and I have ever heard. And we wish so
Absolutely.
bad that he was around when we were leaving our relationships because, oh my goodness, just the advice and the support and the safety of it is incredible. And the way he describes the abuse and what is abuse, just the entire book and his podcast as well are absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Lizzie and let her talk about her situation. And then she's going
Yes,
to share her story also about her friend. And then,
absolutely.
yeah,
Thank you, Deana.
thank you.
Thank you for sharing. I know a lot of what you were sharing with about Rex, some of that was pretty mirrored my first marriage. I even had the police called and everything, but I will probably pause my story for another day from just because that has to deal with a lot of religious abuse along with the emotional abuse. But I had a friend, I know that if you're a parent, a lot of times we make friends because our kids get along, right? They're like buddies. So you end up making friends with that parent. So I met a friend and her son and my son became friends. And then one day she started to tell me about her struggles with her marriage and that she was not happy, pretty much is how I got through it. But then it started to shift. Her conversation started to switch from if I leave to when I leave. And she would tell me how she would go through the house mentally going, I'm going to take this, I'm going to take that, and this and that, so she could like set up her own home. Well, here's the thing, she did not go through physical abuse. She was kind of struggling with some emotional abuse. So at this point, there was no sign of any type of physical. Uh, then one time she reached out to me and she said, I found a place to live because she got to the point it got so bad that she knew she had to leave. She said, I found this place to live. She texted me and she said, it's pretty much right around the corner from where I lived when she gave me the address. And I was really excited. We both were, I think, because that gave, a chance for our sons to hang out, be a lot closer, especially if you're two single moms. And then, like a day later, she texted me and she asked me to thank and pray for her because her husband wanted to talk to her that night. He wanted her to know that, I want us to have a talk. And she said, I'm just a little concerned that he knows something is going on. So I told her, I said, thank you for keeping me in the loop. Please, keep me updated, keep me posted. And she says, okay. The next evening, I was in a room of other educators, so to speak. And the education world can be a little small when you're in the same county, not necessarily district, but the county. And I was among some people as we were working on a project, and someone leaned down and said, hey, have you heard any news about that person? And we, it, for some reason, even though there was not a lot of information given, I knew they were talking about my friend. And I was like, what? My ears perked up, right? I said, what are you saying? What did you just say? She said, oh, this person, because she was over something that we all were a part of in this community. And they said she was supposedly killed, but I haven't heard anything. At that point, I knew it was her. And that's a moment in my life. I could tell you where I was standing. I could see the people around me. And I can also tell you the grief that went through my whole body because I had just texted her the night before. So what happened was her her son walked in on them the next day, and what happened was her husband had killed her and then took his life. So her son found both his parents gone in a moment. And you can tell me, what does that mean? I'm going to tell you that tells you why your exit plan is incredibly important when you get to that point, because this was not a physical abuse that was going on. This was all emotional abuse. And through statistics, physical abuse starts first with emotional abuse. And when they lose that kind of control and they realize you're going to leave, you don't know what you're walking into. And as Deana stated up above, let me see, what was it? Women are 6 times more likely to be killed if gun is in the house. That's a huge percent. So if you are in a situation that you know you are going through this emotional abuse and you know you need to leave, first of all, I have a great book, like Deana was sharing. Enough is Enough by David Clarke is probably the best book Deana and I have seen an outline when you are dealing with emotional abuse, and especially narcissists. That I think, Deana, you said, you hit the nail on the head when you said, was he in my house? Because we both felt that, right? We both felt like finally some people are starting to understand, those of us that have been in these emotionally abusive marriages. We have people that are actually outlining it. And being a woman of faith, David Clarke actually like uses scripture if that's, if you need to have some peace of mind. He gives you some steps, but some of the ways to prepare yourself and be ready to the best of your ability. I know when you go through emotional abuse, the highs and the lows can be all over the place. And I know it's so easy that the good times can be really good, that sometimes the bad moments hit hard and they hit fast. So I would say be prepared. And one of the things that I'll kind of basically say what Clarke kind of set out, and if I have a little out of sync, I'm sorry, Dr. Clarke. But one would be to pick your counsel and pick it wisely. That's pretty much your team. Okay. And if you are a friend of somebody that is going through this situation and they come to you, listen as well, because your part, your role in their exit is so critical, and your support is the most golden thing you can give to an abused person. If you have someone that I also want to tell people, if you have a friend or a family member that reaches out to you, some of these may seem like no-brainers, but I've heard people say these things. Please do not say, if someone tells you that they're going through all this emotional abuse, don't say, well, that's a lot of drama, and I'm not interested in drama. I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to be in the middle of it. Instead, would you just ask them, do you feel safe? If you don't, then let's call the police and make sure you're safe. Or you can give them the domestic violence hotline number. And another great support would be for you, as a person that really does, this is just too much for you to handle. Maybe you could say, let me brainstorm some people that can be there for you. Don't just leave them out there. Another thing, don't say there are two sides to the story, his side, her side, and the actual truth. Because if the person that is being abused is sharing the truth and you say that to them, you're almost victimizing them all over again. So, number one, pick your team, choose your counsel, and support wisely. Next thing, start planning financially. And I know for some, when you're being controlled financially, or you're not the major breadwinner because you've been staying at home, this is hard to do. This is easier said than done. That's why your support system is number one. But first of all, try to be educated on ideas and ways to make money. If you have any way to pocket money, if you're given an allowance or whatever, just pocket every little bit that you can, because you want to be prepared for whatever could come your way. Because trust me, I have seen it over and over, and I know Deana has too, that when you leave, they're going to get back at you any way they can. And one of the things is they can shift and change the money situation. They could take a long time to make sure that you have the support. So making sure you have your financial planning in place is important as well. Also, get your kids ready to leave. Now, one thing, I don't know if Deana was like this, so you can tell me, Deana, but I think when our kids went through this, we wanted to protect them. We didn't tell them exactly what we were going through. Well, the way I get it now is that they need to know he did this, especially when you know they've crossed a line. So they know why you're doing what you're doing. Okay. And to leave a situation doesn't mean that you're going to divorce. Sometimes that is just the best way to possibly save your marriage, right? I think because Deana and I both left, we didn't have a good exit strategy, and we didn't like make the first exit last, like to give it enough time to see if they change. Okay.
You
Time
know what,
is,
Lizzie, if I can just jump in, I
oh,
think
yeah,
sometimes, sometimes you don't leave, or if you do, you don't leave for long enough because you just really don't understand the cycle of
exactly.
abuse, or you don't
Hmm.
deeply really understand that you were being abused. And if I ever had one doubt from that 26-year relationship that I was being abused, this book highlighted everything for me. I mean, like Lizzie and I said, it was like this psychologist or psychologist. It was like he was standing in my house and saying, I bet you've been through this and this and this, and this is abuse. And he really drives it home that this is abuse. So, but when you're younger or you're married and you just, or with somebody and you love them, it clouds your judgment and you really just don't understand how important it
Right.
is to leave and how badly you're being abused until later when you heal and you look back. And if you look at normal relationships, you're like right now in my current, relationship with my husband, I'm just like, how could I ever have not thought I was being abused? How could I ever have thought that? Like normal relationships don't do
Hmm.
any of these things, but you just don't know what you don't know.
Right. And I know that a lot of times when you're in those type of relationships, especially when I think of emotional abuse, um, you're kind of isolated from learning about abuse. So I think that's why this message, you may think, well, this does not pertain to me because I am not in an abusive situation and I don't need to exit. It absolutely does. Because let me tell you something, the women that need to hear this the most, the women that need the support the most, a lot of times have been suppressed. They do not, they're not able to go on the internet, without being monitored. They can't make phone calls. They can't have books laying around. I know with my first husband, I had a book on emotional abuse, verbally abusive relationship, and I hid it and he found it. So they need that kind of support to learn, and it may take creative ways for the team to help her, learn these things, but to realize that what she's going through, she's not alone, to realize that she's not crazy, that all her feelings, her jumbled up feelings are very valid, and to encourage her that her exit plan is critical. Now, sadly, a lot of times it has to be when they're ready, but you will start to hear those indicators. And when you hear those indicators, I'd like to really encourage you to really just help them put things into place or help them find the people to put these things in place because they need that. And we do not want anyone else to be a statistic because the rest of us had no idea what could happen.
Yeah. And I remember when we talked about this story, Lizzie, you said that everybody was absolutely dumbfounded when this
Yes.
happened to your friend because they knew she was being emotionally abused, or, she shared, with you that she was being
Mm-hmm.
emotionally abused. But anybody who knew her husband never in a million years thought that he was
No.
capable of this. And I think that this story is so important because it drives home that fact that sometimes, ladies, you really don't know who you're living with. You
Right.
really don't know what they're capable of. And I would even say sometimes they don't even know what they're capable of
Yeah.
because a switch flips and they just turn to somebody else when they've been, confronted.
Yeah.
So, really important to keep that in mind that any kind of abuse requires a very carefully exited plan.
Yes. And I hope this really resonates, that you remember this story when these moments may come up in your path of someone that you love or care about, because it's very important to protect the ones that we can, because those statistics are very real. I mean, you have about 3 people a day. What is it? 3 women a day and 1 man from
Every
a
single
domestic
day.
partner every single day. That's 4 people a day that are killed from a domestic partner.
And that doesn't even count like, being smacked around or,
Hmm.
all the emotional abuse or, just the years and years of, just complete pain and heartache that these people are being, this is just flat out killing somebody,
Yeah.
and that's a long, very large number.
Yeah, exactly. If you have any questions or you want to reach out to us, just go to the matadoras.com. We have ways that you can contact us. If you want to schedule a discovery call or anything like that because you find that you might be in these situations, feel free to give us a call, or put your contact information in. I know that if you're in a situation where you're being monitored, let us know that. Appreciate that.
Yeah. And once again, please, if you have any questions whatsoever that you are being abused, please grab that book or listen to the podcast. Enough is Enough by David Clarke. He is a faith-based man, but the beauty about this is he is very, very black and white, and he is very, very, how would you say it? He has
I'm
very strong language about sometimes faith-based organizations will pat the abuser on the head because they don't realize, that they're an abuser. They believe their story,
Mhm.
or they will just tell them to, pray about it, or they'll tell the wife to submit. That's a big hot topic right there. Holy cow. If I had a dime for every time I wanted to smack someone around that said that, I won't go there right now. But I'm just saying, listen, submission is, if someone loves you and adores you, you're naturally going to both be kind and loving and quote, quote, submissive to each
Mhm.
other because you are both making each other happy and each other's highest priority. When
Absolutely.
you are with an abuser, submission is literally just enablement of abuse. Submission should never be a word in an abusive relationship,
Mhm.
ever. And this guy hammers that out. So it was very, very refreshing to hear that. I think even if you're not a faith-based person, I promise you, you will still glean some incredible information out of his material. So,
Absolutely. And then also, if you are a friend of someone who can't download the book or have the book in their house, maybe a little idea would be to download that book for them. And when they come to spend time with you, let them have a quiet place to listen to it and let them digest and think about the words that Clarke says, and enough is enough. But
yeah,
we both highly recommend that book. You can find it through
absolutely.
Amazon. You can find, listen to it through Audible. You have so many opportunities, and I think he has such great steps to protect yourself.
You know what, Lizzie? Let's add a link too. Let's add a link on our YouTube.
Okay.
Can we figure that out? I know we haven't done that yet. Just throwing it out there. Hey, Lizzie, add a link. But if we can figure it out as non-techie people, we're going to add a link for you so that you can just grab that that book. It's incredible, especially on Audible. It was really amazing just to, read as you're driving and such. But
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't take notes that when I was driving, but
right.
I definitely am on my like third time listening to it, so it's really good stuff. So take the time to read the book, listen to the book if you or somebody you know is in these situations. Absolutely.
And
Thank
then
you.
just remember, you all, that, to please share if you see anybody that or know anybody that potentially might be in a relationship and they should possibly get out. Please share this with them. Remember that we are at the Matadoras.com. Remember, if you're not listening by podcast right now, that we're on Spotify, Apple, Google, and iHeart under the Matadoras, and that we are here to help. And
Absolutely.
Lizzie, if I could ask you one final question, because I think that
Hmm.
this would be the burning question that any audience member would ask.
Right.
I know this was traumatic for you. You've
Mhm.
talked about it a lot, and I know this affected you in such a terrible way.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart, too. I just wonder if you could go back in time. Let's say somebody else is in your situation and someone calls them and says, you know, I'm going to go talk to my ex. If you could go back in time, not to say anything would have changed necessarily, but what would you tell women to do if they get a call or they know about a friend that's dealing with this? I'm sorry, I know this is making you emotional, Lizzie. And I just know that, sometimes
Yeah.
we don't quite know what to do or what to say when somebody says this, to us. But what would you suggest that people would do if they get any kind of a call?
Well, I think when you get any kind of call, you need to really listen. I think the number one thing is if they're leaving because it's that bad, then you know that you need to be a little more aggressive. Treat every person in these situations as if they are the person that you may not see again another day.
Oh, that's beautiful. So if they're telling you that they're going to have to leave because they are that, they're that miserable, which,
Right.
remember you ladies, most people don't leave until it gets so bad. And so by that point, it's
Or
got
they
to be
think it'll
pretty
never
darn
get
bad.
that bad. No one will ever think that they're going to be that victim.
Exactly. So if your friend tells you that they're being abused, they need to understand that if they are being abused to the point where they want to leave the relationship, they need to do it quietly. Okay. So
Yes.
quietly that this person has no idea they're leaving. And this is also spelled out in this book. They need to have a complete plan where when it is time to go, their ex doesn't even know that they're going or where they're going. You can
Yes.
always make up with this person later once and if, which is a very strong if, they go through serious counseling for a very long time. And again, spelled out in the book. But this exit plan needs to be a very quiet exit plan. And it's not one of those where when your ex says, hey, let's meet up quietly, just you and me, that you say yes.
No, no, no.
Never happen because
No.
if they even catch a whiff that you're leaving, and again, I'm not trying to say that every abusive man is going to kill somebody. I'm not trying to say that. Okay, you guys. What I'm trying to say is you don't know who will and who won't.
Because when they
Because
lose
how
that
many times,
control,
yes, how many times have you heard a story, right? Where people were shocked that this person went AWOL. Don't be one of those people. So if you have a friend or a loved one or anybody in your circle, or if you are that person, you need a very quiet stealth plan that they have no idea about. And you need to get out to a safe place. And then you can let them know you're leaving them.
absolutely. And this was a very heavy, hard subject. I mean, to me, abuse in general is hard. I don't think any of our subjects are probably easy, but there are some that probably hit one or both of us harder than others. And
Definitely.
some will, yeah. So, um, thank you guys very much. And we care very deeply about each and every one of you.
We do. So please stay safe.